Well, the Chatterton saga begins in the Orange Free State in Vereniging in South Africa, where Dad, George, was born in 1916. His father was English and his mother was Dutch. And in London, England, where Mum, Kitty Kavanagh, was born in 1917, an only child. Didn't I mention that Dad was one of 12 children? There were 6 boys and 6 girls. And then Mum was an only child. Her little family emigrated to the Gatineau area of Ottawa when Mum was 2. Her father was Anglo-Irish and her mother was English. Mum grew up in the Gatineau area on a small farm, the only English-speaking family in a French-speaking neighborhood. Mum was a good scholar and was encouraged to get her grade 13, which was quite an accomplishment at that time. Dad's family was from a large, prosperous farm. He studied agriculture at the University of Pretoria and Afrikaans University. We still have his diploma, which always intrigued us because it's all in Afrikaans. He then went on to do postgraduate studies in Cornell University in Iowa, I think it is. But his studies were interrupted by the outbreak of the war. He wanted to join up with the Air Force in Canada. He was posted to a number of bases in Canada, including Ottawa, where he met Mum. They were married, Mum and Dad were married in 1945 in Ottawa, and Drew was born the same year in Ottawa. Dad had also been posted to Victoria, which he loved for its beauty, rich farming land, and temperate climate. Mum and Dad then considered the possibility of settling in South Africa. Their second consideration was to settle in Victoria. Mum was very keen to go to South Africa to live, but Dad convinced her that Canada was a much safer place to raise a family. Hence, they settled in Victoria in a small Veterans Land Act house on 2 acres. I was born in 1947, and followed by Peter in 1948, and so Mum had 3 small children under 5, and then along came the baby, Valerie, in 1954. Mum tells a little story of when Dad was courting her. He told her that he had 5 brothers only. I think he didn't want to overwhelm her being an only child. So he told her that he had 5 brothers only. Mum tells the story of finding out about all of his family. This was one day, sometime after they were married, that Dad solemnly asked Mum to come into the living room and to sit down because he had something important to tell her. She was getting more and more nervous, wondering what the truth might be. And at that time, he divulged that he also had 6 sisters. I think he was sort of forced to doing this because letters started to arrive from Mary and a Mona and a Gertie. And so, and then, as was the custom of the time, Mum was largely responsible for caring for the children and the home. She introduced us to the world of the library, where we spent many happy hours poring over books. Mum also read to us for hours every day. She also dutifully took us to church and Sunday school every Sunday here at St. Michael's, and Drew was an altar boy. In his youth, Dad had been required to attend the strict Dutch Reformed Church twice each Sunday. Hence, he joined us at church only on very special occasions, such as our confirmations. Instead, he stayed at home to prepare a big dinner for us on our return home. I remember sitting in in Sunday school, sort of dreaming of the big meal to come. Dad worked as the supervisor of the Veterans Land Act. In that capacity, he worked with many settlers who were farming on the Saanich Peninsula. With his own farming experience and university training, he really enjoyed assisting farmers, offering advice and ideas about new techniques. Drew has fond memories of accompanying Dad when he was very little, accompanying Dad on these visits to these farms when he was still very young. Of the several jobs that Dad had, this one I think remained one of his favorites because he could interact on a one-to-one basis with other settlers. On our own property, we had a very large garden, along with various animals, chickens, ducks, goats, and pigs. We all remember being butted by Herbie the cantankerous goat. Normandy Road was a great neighborhood to grow up in. Children could safely walk down the road to visit their friends. It was fun walking down Normandy and along Pipeline to Royal Oak Elementary. Our parents would drop in to visit with their neighbors. Mum was often hostess to a number of friends and neighbors. I remember being so happy if I could be part of some of these visits. Drew and Peter played with the other boys in the neighborhood, out back as they called it, climbing trees and building tree forts. I also seem to remember spending quite a bit of time at the Harrisons on Old West Road. Their home always seemed so quiet compared to our rather sometimes raucous household. And Mrs. Harrison made the most divine white bread that was so delicious with butter and jam. To my mother's chagrin, I wasn't always happy to leave and go home. Another attraction was the pond that Drew says was where the Canadian Tire store at Broadmead is now. In the summer, we built rafts, and in winters, sometimes the pond froze and we could skate on it. During our time on Normandy, Dad enjoyed being on the school board. Later he became Reeve of Saanich, now known as the mayor, which he also loved because it was a hands-on, practical sort of position. In 1962, in a by-election, Dad was elected Conservative MP for Esquimalt Saanich. Then in 1963, he was re-elected in a general election. In Parliament, he was a backbencher among a throng who were swept in with the Diefenbaker landslide. Our family joined Dad in Ottawa in October 1963. However, Esquimalt Saanich was Dad's constituency and Normandy Road was our home. We would escape the heat and humidity of an Ottawa summer and return by train to the sea breezes of the island. Mum was quite a shy and private person, and she found being a politician's wife quite stressful at times, I think. But she faithfully and nobly did everything attendant to the role, hosting tea parties, campaigning, and being in the public eye. Being in Ottawa was a tremendous experience and education for Drew, Peter, Valerie, and myself. We met children of parents of different cultures and languages. Our high school offered French, English, German, and Russian. We were also introduced to the study of Latin, which was mandatory, which was quite a challenge. We sat in the public gallery of the House of Commons and learned a lot about how Parliament worked. We especially enjoyed the question period, which was especially exciting when we could see the sparring back and forth of the members. I remember the opening of Parliament which in those days was a splendid affair. Wives, and lucky for me, older daughters, dressed up in evening garb, long dresses, just as if you were going to a ball, and you sat in the House of Commons to listen to the throne speech. Traveling back and forth to and from Ottawa was also a wonderful experience. Went by train. I remember especially sitting in the Dome car, marveling at the beauty of the Rockies. I also found the prairie provinces quite fascinating, with their clear skies and clear blue skies and golden wheat. Dad was defeated in 1968 when Trudeau-mania swept the country. He then worked for the provincial government and later in the private sector. It was during that time when a friend and realtor approached our parents and said, "Kitty and George, you deserve a really nice home, and I have one just for you." Hence, they took the plunge and they moved to 2180 Beach Drive across from Willows Beach. Soon the new home drew family and friends into their gracious abode. We grown-up children were amazed that they had actually moved from Normandy Road. It was sometime after Dad's death in 1983 that the road in the newly developed Broadmead area was named Chatterton Way. We have a very sweet picture of Mum at the little ceremony to officially name the road. Things have come full circle now. Drew now lives at the Memorial Lodge in Broadmead on Chatterton Way. Thank you, Sharlie. Thank you, yeah.